The sun hadn't yet risen, but the silence on this cul-de-sac felt unnatural. Normally, by this hour, sprinklers would hiss to life, coffee makers would gurgle from inside kitchen windows, and cars would begin pulling out for early morning shifts. But today, it was still. Lifeless. A single 911 call broke that silence. A shaky, breathless voice whispered into the phone, "It's the Miller house. I think they're all dead." Within minutes, red and blue lights bled into the dawn haze. Officers stepped inside a two-story cream-colored home with white shutters and wind chimes still swaying on the front porch. What they found inside would haunt them for years. 4 bodies. 2 adults. 2 children. All in different rooms. No sign of forced entry. No burglary. No struggle. But one thing was very clear, this wasn't a random act of violence. It was deliberate. Intimate. Personal. And the person missing from the home? 12-year-old Emily Miller. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't kidnapped. She was already hundreds of miles away, on the road, with a man 3 times her age. A man the family never knew existed. Small-town life in Maple Ridge, Missouri, was as quiet as it came. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, teachers taught multiple generations of the same families, and everyone knew who your daddy was. For the Millers, life looked picture-perfect from the outside. Angela Miller, a second-grade teacher, was beloved at the elementary school. Her husband, Thomas Miller, worked in the city as a logistics manager, hard-working, reliable, always smiling at the gas station clerk. Their 2 sons, Josh and Ethan, were inseparable video game junkies, and Emily, well, Emily was the youngest. The baby. The curious one. The one who seemed to have a little too much screen time. She was bright. Quiet. Not exactly popular at school, but not bullied either. Just, there. In the background. But what no one knew, not even her parents, was that Emily was already living a second life online. One where she wasn't a child. One where she wasn't told what time to sleep, what not to wear, or what apps to delete. In that world, she was someone's entire universe. His name was Wesley Carter, and to Emily, he was the only one who truly understood her. To him, she wasn't a little girl. She was his angel. His soulmate. His ride or die. And over the course of 8 months, he didn't just groom her. He convinced her that the people who loved her most were the ones standing in the way of her freedom. No alarms were raised when Emily crept out of her room. No lights turned on when she slipped into her parents' bedroom. No one heard the footsteps. What followed was a horror that would leave even seasoned investigators speechless. And when they pieced it all together, the planning, the online messages, the quiet rage, it would become one of the most disturbing juvenile crime cases in U.S. history. A 12-year-old girl, deeply manipulated, wholly infatuated, and entirely consumed by the idea of forever with a man who had stolen her innocence, had made the ultimate trade. Her family, for love. This is the story of how it happened. Of how nobody saw it coming. Of how one child's loneliness turned deadly in the hands of a predator. And of the lives shattered in pursuit of a fantasy that was never real to begin with. Angela Miller woke up every morning at 5:30 a.m., not because she had to, but because she liked the silence before her kids started moving. The hum of the coffee maker, the quiet rustle of the newspaper, the brief moment of peace before another day of lessons and lunch duty. She loved her job as a second-grade teacher. The children adored her. Parents trusted her. Colleagues leaned on her. At school, she was Mrs. Miller, the warm, steady woman with a drawer full of peppermint candies and a heart twice the size of her small frame. At home, she was just Mom. The glue that held her family together. Her husband, Thomas, left for work around 6:45. He managed freight schedules for a logistics company just outside the city. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and he was proud of that. He was the kind of man who remembered birthdays, washed his car every Saturday morning, and never let his gas tank fall below a quarter. The kind of man who still kissed his wife goodbye, even if she was half asleep when he did it. Josh, the oldest, had just turned 14. He was quiet, thoughtful, and obsessed with strategy games. Ethan, the middle child, was 11 and the complete opposite, loud, fast-talking, always getting into things he shouldn't. They were best friends and worst enemies, depending on the day. The Miller house was full of bickering, laughter, late-night snacks, and chore lists no one followed. It was normal. Unremarkable. Happy in the way most families hope to be. And then there was Emily. At 12, she was still in that in-between stage, not quite a child, not yet a teenager. She was small for her age, with pale skin and wispy blonde hair that she always tucked behind her ears. She spent most of her time in her room, curled up with her tablet, watching makeup tutorials and reading fanfiction. She was bright, gifted, her teacher said, but she rarely spoke in class. Her friends were few, and mostly online. She never caused trouble. Never broke curfew. She did her chores, kept her room clean, and always said, please, and thank you. She was easy. Too easy, Angela would sometimes say with a tired smile, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. What the Millers didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined, was that Emily was slowly slipping away from them. Not in the dramatic, rebellious way people expect. Not with slammed doors and angry words. But in silence. In secrecy. In the glow of a screen at night, when the rest of the house was asleep and her world stretched far beyond those bedroom walls. It had started months ago. A friend request. A message. Just a compliment from someone who claimed to be a teenager too. She didn't even remember what the first thing he said was. Something harmless. Something sweet. His profile picture was blurry, but he said his name was Wes, and that he was 17. He told her she was pretty. That she seemed different. Special. Emily had never heard those words before, not like that. Not from someone who wasn't family. And slowly, message by message, day by day, she started talking to him more than anyone else. At first, it was innocent. He asked about her day, her favorite shows, what made her sad. But as the weeks passed, his tone changed. He started calling her late at night. Started asking for pictures. Started getting jealous when she didn't respond fast enough. And when she finally asked how old he really was, he didn't lie. I'm 36, he typed. But I swear to God, age doesn't matter when two souls are this connected. She should have blocked him. She should have told someone. But by then, it was too late. She was already hooked. Already in love, or what she thought love was. He made her feel seen. Important. Needed. And for a lonely 12-year-old girl who never quite fit in, that was everything. Back at home, the signs were subtle. More time in her room. Less interest in family dinners. A new lock screen password on her tablet. Angela noticed. Of course she did. But she chalked it up to hormones, the usual growing pains. Emily was a good kid. She had no reason to suspect anything darker than mood swings or middle school crushes. She had no idea her daughter had been targeted. Groomed. Pulled into a world she couldn't understand. And while the Millers laughed at dinner, planned summer vacations, and argued over whose turn it was to take out the trash, Emily was quietly planning her escape. The messages started to feel like a lifeline. Every ding of her phone, every new bubble that popped up on her screen, gave her a hit of something she couldn't explain. It was like a secret world, one where she was no longer the quiet, overlooked girl in her family. With Wesley, she was everything. He called her, baby, my girl, wifey. He told her he loved her 100 different ways. And slowly, she began to believe him. Not just believe him, she began to trust him more than anyone she'd ever known. He made her laugh. He listened to her complaints about school, about how her brothers never let her choose the TV shows, about how her parents didn't understand her. He told her they didn't deserve her. That they treated her like a child, when clearly, she wasn't. She liked that. The way he spoke to her like an adult. Like an equal. And then came the first test. He asked her to keep their conversations a secret. They wouldn't get it, he said. They'd ruin it. They'd take you away from me. She hesitated, but not for long. By then, she was already choosing him over everyone else, even if she didn't realize it yet. After that, the conversations grew darker. He started talking about how cruel the world was. How people didn't understand love like theirs. How most people lived and died without ever finding their soulmate. But not them. They were the exception. We're meant to be together, he wrote, over and over. You and me against the world. Then came the lies. He told her he was being followed. That people were trying to hurt him. That she was the only person who could save him. He spun story after story, carefully crafted to make her feel needed, heroic, brave. He made himself the victim and turned her into his protector. A 12-year-old girl who had never even left her hometown was now convinced that she was the only one who could keep a grown man safe. But he didn't stop there. He started asking about her family. What time they went to bed. Where they kept the spare keys. Whether her dad ever locked the front door. He did it gently at first, slipping the questions into conversations like they meant nothing. And when she answered, he praised her. Told her how smart she was. How strong. How loyal. He made her feel powerful. Like she was part of a plan bigger than herself. Emily had no idea she was being conditioned. That every compliment was a thread, pulling her deeper into his world. That every moment she spent online with him was another moment he was tightening his grip. To her, it felt like freedom. Like escape. Like the kind of love she had only read about in stories. At school, teachers started to notice something was off. She was more distracted than usual. Zoning out in class. Turning in assignments late. One teacher even pulled her aside and asked if everything was okay. Emily smiled, nodded, and said she was just tired. They believed her. She was polite. Respectful. Not the kind of kid who caused trouble. Meanwhile, Wesley was getting bolder. He told her he wanted to see her. To hold her. That he couldn't wait anymore. He started talking about running away. About starting over somewhere new, where no one could find them. He painted vivid pictures of small apartments, warm beds, her cooking breakfast in the morning while he kissed her neck. You're not a little girl, he told her. You're a woman. My woman. And when Emily told him it would never happen, that her parents would never allow it, he went quiet. Then, slowly, he began planting the seeds. They don't care about you the way I do. They don't understand you. They'll try to take you from me. They're the problem. It didn't happen all at once. It took weeks. Months. But little by little, she started to believe it. That her family was standing in the way of something real. That they were trying to trap her in a life she didn't want. That they were the enemy. By the time Wesley said the words, "You know what we have to do," she didn't flinch. She just nodded. And when he asked her if she loved him, if she really, truly loved him, she said yes. Then she asked him when. He said soon. And the countdown began. Emily began to change. Not in any loud, dramatic way. It was subtle, careful, calculated, just the way Wesley told her it had to be. He warned her not to act differently, not to raise suspicion. You have to stay invisible, he said. Just a little longer. And so she did. She smiled when spoken to. She went to school. She did her chores. But underneath the surface, everything was different. She wasn't thinking like a child anymore. She was thinking like someone on a mission. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, she would pull her tablet out from under her pillow and message Wesley. He sent her lists, what to do, what to bring, how to cover her tracks. He told her not to worry. That once they were together, none of this would matter. It'll just be us, he said. Forever. No more rules. No more cages. Emily started watching videos about hiding fingerprints, wiping down surfaces, what kind of weapons left the least mess. She didn't fully understand what she was looking at, but Wesley walked her through every detail. He told her what to search, what sites to avoid, what words not to use. It wasn't a conversation anymore, it was instruction. Step by step, he was building her into something else. Someone else. Someone capable. And she followed him, blindly. She began to write things down in a spiral notebook, phrases he used, ideas, reminders. Don't hesitate. Fast is better. 1 shot per person, minimum. No crying. The notebook stayed hidden behind a false drawer in her closet, right next to an old shoebox where she'd started stashing things Wesley said they'd need. Cash. A kitchen knife. A map of the interstate. A prepaid phone he sent her through a friend's address. One night, he asked her a question. If I told you the only way for us to be together was to make them go away, forever, would you do it? She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she wrote back, I would do anything for you. He didn't respond for a full minute. And when he did, all he said was, good girl. From that moment on, things moved fast. He told her to stop using social media. To delete every message between them. To break her tablet the day before they left. He even sent her a video tutorial on how to reset her phone to factory settings. He was methodical, practiced, deliberate. This wasn't the first time he'd manipulated someone, and it showed. Emily had no idea she was just another name on a long list of girls Wesley had preyed on. She thought she was his one and only. His soulmate. But to him, she was just the one who said yes. She picked a Friday night. It was the easiest time. Her brothers would be asleep by 10. Her parents usually stayed up watching TV until 11, sometimes later, but they both took melatonin. Wesley reminded her of that. They'll be slow to react, he said. That's when you do it. He told her not to bring the knife from the kitchen. It was too risky. Instead, he mailed her a small, sharp blade tucked inside a stuffed bear. It arrived in a nondescript brown box 3 weeks before everything happened. Angela opened it, confused, but assumed it was a belated birthday gift from one of Emily's out-of-state cousins. Emily took it to her room and unzipped the back of the bear. The blade was wrapped in duct tape, sealed in a Ziploc bag. She stared at it for hours that night. And then she hid it under her bed. Wesley gave her one final list. Things to remember. Stay calm. Move quickly. Don't look them in the eyes. And no matter what happens, no matter how scared you get, don't stop. He told her he'd be waiting on the edge of town with his car running. That once she got in, it would all be over. That she would finally be free. Free. That was the word that kept echoing in her head. Not love. Not escape. Just, free. And so, on a night that felt like any other, Emily brushed her teeth, kissed her mom goodnight, and went to bed. Only she didn't go to sleep. She waited. Waited until the house was quiet. Waited until the lights were out. Waited until the air felt heavy and still. And then she got up, pulled the blade from beneath her bed, and stepped out into the hallway with no shoes, no fear, and no hesitation. The hallway was darker than usual. Emily's eyes adjusted slowly as she moved past the bathroom, past the linen closet, toward the room at the end of the hall. Her parents' door was slightly ajar, just enough for her to see the flicker of the television glow still dancing on the ceiling. She could hear the soft hum of voices, some old sitcom rerun playing too low to make out the words. Her father snored lightly. Her mother coughed once, turned over. Emily stood at the threshold and waited. She told herself she was strong. She told herself she was doing this for love. That after this moment, she'd never feel trapped again. That Wesley would take care of everything. That she would finally be someone. Not the quiet girl. Not the invisible daughter. But the woman who chose her own path. Her fingers tightened around the blade. It felt heavier than it had before. Colder. Like it knew what was coming. She stepped into the room. Angela stirred and opened her eyes just enough to make out the shape standing beside the bed. "Em," she whispered, voice thick with sleep. "Sweetheart, what is it?" Emily didn't answer. She took one step closer. Thomas, still half asleep, turned his head. "You okay?" he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. That's when she raised the knife. The rest happened in seconds. A blur of movement. A gasp. A scream. The sound of sheets twisting, bodies jolting. Angela tried to sit up, but Emily was already there. The blade came down, once, twice, again. Thomas lunged forward, trying to grab her, but the pain hit too fast, too sudden. He let out a strangled cry and rolled off the bed, hitting the floor with a thud. Angela reached for her daughter's face, whispered something, maybe her name, maybe a plea, but Emily didn't stop. Wesley's voice echoed in her mind, "Don't stop." When it was over, she stood there shaking, her nightgown soaked in red. Her breath came in shallow, uneven bursts. She stared at her mother's still body, then down at her own hands, like she was seeing them for the first time. She dropped the knife. For a long time, she didn't move. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just stood in the middle of the bedroom, surrounded by silence. Her entire world had just changed, and all she could feel was cold. Then she remembered the list. She stepped out of the room, walked barefoot down the hallway to her brother's shared room. The door creaked open. Ethan stirred and rolled onto his side. "Em," he mumbled, not even opening his eyes. "What are you doing?" She stood over him, silent. Josh, on the top bunk, looked down, confused. "Why are you?" She moved fast. Too fast. Wesley had warned her. If you hesitate with them, you won't finish. You have to be faster. It didn't take long. Less than a minute. And when it was done, the house was still. The laughter that once filled the rooms, the music from Ethan's Bluetooth speaker, the rustle of cereal boxes in the morning, it was all gone. All of it, erased. Emily walked to the bathroom, washed her hands in the sink like she was getting ready for school. She changed her clothes, tied her hair up in a ponytail, and grabbed the bag she had packed 3 nights before. Inside was cash, her ID, a hoodie Wesley told her to bring, and the prepaid phone she had turned off and wrapped in a sock. She slipped out the back door. The night was quiet. The sky a deep, moonless black. She walked quickly, sticking to shadows, just like he told her. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack her ribs. Every step felt like a dream. Not a nightmare, just unreal. Like she was floating through someone else's body. Wesley was waiting in a black car on the shoulder of the county road, headlights off. She climbed in without a word. He smiled at her like she had just done something incredible. Brave. Beautiful. You did it, he said, reaching over to touch her face. Now we can finally be together. Emily didn't say anything. She just looked out the window, as the car pulled away and the house behind her, her entire life, disappeared into the distance. The sun rose like it always did. Birds chirped. Cars passed. Neighbors watered their lawns. But inside the Monroe house, there was only silence. A deep, unnatural kind of silence. Hours passed. A mail carrier noticed the mailbox still full. The front porch light was still on. Strange, but not alarming. Not yet. By evening, a neighbor knocked on the door. No answer. They tried calling Angela's cell, straight to voicemail. Then Thomas. Nothing. It wasn't until Josh's best friend came by looking for him that someone finally called the police. The first officer arrived just after 8 p.m. He knocked. Waited. Walked the perimeter. No signs of forced entry. No signs of life either. When backup arrived, they entered through the unlocked back door. What they found inside would follow them for the rest of their lives. The living room was untouched. Kitchen spotless. It wasn't until they reached the hallway that things began to feel wrong. The smell hit first, metallic, thick. The master bedroom door was ajar, and what lay inside didn't make sense at first. It didn't register. 2 adults, lifeless. Covered in blood. No signs of a struggle. Just, gone. Down the hall, it was worse. 2 children, 1 bunk bed. Same story. No one could understand it. A family so seemingly normal. No enemies. No drama. No reason. Except one thing was missing. Emily. Her bed was empty. Her closet half open. A few pieces of clothing gone. No signs of forced abduction. No broken windows. No ransom note. Just, missing. The entire house became a crime scene. Yellow tape stretched across the doorway. News vans showed up within hours. Reporters swarmed the street like vultures, speculating, spinning theories. Had someone broken in and taken Emily? Was she alive? Was she the key to solving what happened? Detective Laura Jensen was called in. A seasoned investigator with 20 years under her belt, she took one look at the scene and knew this wasn't random. Too clean, she said. Too specific. They searched the home for clues, combing through drawers, computers, notebooks. That's when they found the spiral-bound journal. Tucked between 2 hoodies in the closet. Inside were pages and pages of strange, haunting notes. Instructions. Phrases like, no crying, wipe it down, don't stop. It wasn't just a diary. It was a blueprint. A few pages in, they found the name, Wesley Parker. A quick search led to his social media. 36 years old. Former youth counselor. Fired from 2 jobs. A history of inappropriate contact with minors that never led to formal charges. Girls as young as 13 had messaged him in the past, though none were willing to testify. He had slipped through the cracks. Until now. Jensen knew immediately, Emily hadn't been taken. She had left. Willingly. With him. A nationwide Amber Alert was issued. Wesley's face flashed across every screen. Emily's school photo appeared on billboards. Tips flooded in from 4 states. Sightings. Descriptions. None confirmed. But they were getting closer. Wesley, ever confident, wasn't hiding as well as he thought. Gas station footage showed Emily with him 3 towns over, wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too big, her hair tucked under a cap. She looked scared. He looked calm. When asked what direction they'd gone, the attendant pointed west. By day 3, the FBI got involved. A federal manhunt began. But Emily had no idea. In the hotel rooms they stayed in, Wesley kept her away from the TV. Took her phone. Told her the world was lying. They don't understand us, he said. They're trying to destroy what we have. He filled her head with more stories, more poison. And she believed him. At least for a while. But something had changed. That first night, as she lay in a motel bed beside him, staring at the popcorn ceiling, reality began to sink in. She missed the smell of her mom's shampoo. Her little brother's laugh. The sound of the dishwasher late at night. And most of all, the quiet comfort of knowing she was home. Now, she was nowhere. And for the first time, she was beginning to wonder if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Wesley thought he was clever. He paid in cash. Took back roads. Switched license plates twice. But what he didn't realize was that the world was now watching him. Every highway camera, every traffic light, every store clerk who saw a grown man traveling with a child that didn't quite look like his daughter, it all added up. Detective Jensen coordinated with state police across multiple counties. They pieced together his direction. Westbound. Small towns. Cheap motels. Fast food receipts. All signs pointed to Idaho. Then Oregon. But they didn't just want to catch him. They wanted Emily alive. Jensen couldn't stop thinking about the journal. About the pages of brainwashing and instructions. It wasn't just a murder case, it was psychological warfare. A 12-year-old child manipulated into committing something she couldn't even fully understand. Jensen knew time was critical. The longer Emily stayed under Wesley's control, the harder it would be to bring her back. Meanwhile, inside motel rooms across dusty stretches of the Northwest, Emily was changing. She wasn't speaking as much. She stared at walls. She flinched when Wesley touched her shoulder. He noticed, of course. And it irritated him. "You said you wanted this," he reminded her. "We talked about this. We planned this. Don't start acting brand new." But something had shifted. The adrenaline was gone. The fantasy had faded. And in its place was a gnawing, endless grief. She couldn't sleep. She barely ate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw their faces. Her mother's hand reaching out. Josh's confused eyes blinking in the dark. Her father's voice, half asleep, asking if she was okay. She wasn't okay. And for the first time since she left home, she wanted to go back. She didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But Wesley could sense it. He began to tighten his grip. He stopped letting her use the bathroom alone. Kept the keys on his person at all times. Took the phone charger with him when he left the room. "It's just us now," he kept saying. "You and me against the world." Emily nodded. But she didn't believe him anymore. At a diner in eastern Oregon, a waitress noticed something strange. The girl sat across from the man, never spoke, barely ate. Her hands trembled when she reached for her drink. The man did all the talking, ordering for her, correcting her posture, even scolding her when she dropped a spoon. Something wasn't right. The waitress wrote down their license plate after they left. It was the break investigators needed. Within hours, state troopers had the car's location narrowed down to a 20-mile radius. A BOLO alert was issued. Officers began searching roadside motels, one by one. At 3:27 a.m., they found the car. Parked behind a rundown roadside lodge near the edge of a forest line. Officers approached quietly, weapons drawn. The front desk confirmed they'd checked in under a false name, but the girl matched Emily's description. Room 14. They breached the door at 3:41 a.m. Inside, Emily was sitting on the floor in the corner, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes wide. Silent. Wesley reached for something, what, no one knew, but he didn't get far. He was tackled. Cuffed. Dragged out, screaming about lies and conspiracies and how they'd never understand their love. Emily didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She just rocked back and forth, holding her knees to her chest, whispering something no one could make out. It took hours to calm her down. She was taken to a hospital. Interviewed gently. Federal cleaned. Given fresh clothes. But she didn't speak much. Only cried. For 3 days straight. The nation was in shock. Headlines exploded. 12-year-old girl murders family, flees with 36-year-old man. But behind the sensationalism was a much harder truth: Emily was both victim and perpetrator. A child groomed, conditioned, and coerced. But also the one who carried out the violence. Psychologists were brought in. Trauma counselors. Legal experts debated endlessly, what should happen next? Was she to be charged as an adult? Placed in a juvenile facility? Could she ever be rehabilitated? Emily didn't ask. She barely spoke at all. When she finally did, her voice was quiet. Hollow. I thought he loved me, she said. I thought I had to do it, or he'd leave me. She paused, then whispered, but I think he was always going to leave me. I just got there first. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as reporters jostled for positions, their cameras flashing at every angle. It was a media circus, every news outlet, racing to cover the trial of the decade. A 12-year-old girl accused of unaliving her entire family for a man almost 3 times her age. The world watched as the little girl who had been manipulated into committing such unimaginable violence was about to face the consequences. But this wasn't just any trial. This wasn't a typical case of a child acting out in rage or misdirected anger. This was something far more complicated. The country was divided, half of the public demanding justice, wanting Emily to pay for her actions. The other half mourning her loss, blaming the man who had groomed and manipulated her. Her every move was scrutinized under a microscope, and the legal battle for her future began. It was a trial that would become a battleground not just for Emily's freedom, but for the soul of a child who had been pushed too far. Everyone wanted to know, how much of this was Emily's fault? And how much of it could be blamed on the man who had twisted her reality for his own purposes? Emily sat in the defendant's chair, looking smaller than ever, her eyes swollen from weeks of sleepless nights. She barely looked up, keeping her face hidden behind strands of her brown hair. Her once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a shell of the girl she had been before all of this started. Her lawyer, a kind woman named Valerie Brooks, had worked tirelessly to prepare for this case, not just to defend her, but to make sure the jury understood what had truly happened. You have to remember, Valerie said quietly to Emily before the trial began. We are not here to paint you as a villain. We are here to show the world the truth of what happened. The prosecution, however, had a different agenda. They argued that Emily knew exactly what she was doing. That, despite the manipulation and the grooming, she was still the one who held the knife. She was the one who ended her family's lives. That she had done it with a clear mind and purpose. The evidence was damning. Emily's fingerprints on the murder weapon. The bloody crime scene. The journal that spoke of dark, twisted plans. And the tapes. The recordings Wesley had made of their conversations, where he told her again and again that she had no choice but to follow through. But they also showed a pattern. He had built a fantasy, manipulated her, slowly pulling her in until there was nothing left but a warped sense of reality. But none of this mattered in the eyes of the prosecution. They painted Emily as a cold-blooded killer, a child who had been corrupted by a dangerous man and was now being coddled by her defense team. The media, ever hungry for controversy, seized on this angle, calling her America's youngest killer and questioning if she could ever be trusted again. Through it all, Emily remained silent. She barely spoke to anyone. The weight of her guilt, the consequences of her actions, were too much to process. She spent her days in the juvenile detention center, her world reduced to small rooms and whispers. She had no friends, no family to comfort her, just a lawyer trying to keep her from being swallowed by the legal system. But Valerie knew she was dealing with a child. A child who had been manipulated. A child who had been forced into an impossible situation. She was brainwashed, Valerie argued in her opening statement. She didn't understand what she was doing. She didn't want to hurt anyone. She wanted to save herself from a man who had completely control over her mind. Emily's testimony was painful to hear. She spoke in a quiet, trembling voice. She talked about how Wesley had been kind to her, how he had told her she was special, how he was the only person who truly understood her. She described the moments when she had questioned everything, when she knew what she was doing wasn't right, but couldn't stop. She spoke about the threats, the manipulation, the fear. "I didn't know how to get out," she said, tears streaking down her face. "I thought I had to do it to survive." The courtroom listened, the tension thick. Even the jurors looked torn. Could they really blame a 12-year-old girl for what she had done? Or was she merely a pawn in a game played by an older, more dangerous man? As the trial continued, psychologists were brought in to testify about the effects of manipulation on a young mind. Experts spoke of grooming and the psychological toll it takes. They argued that Emily, at 12, was not capable of fully comprehending the consequences of her actions. That she had been coerced, forced into a corner with no way out. But the prosecution wasn't convinced. They painted her as a willing participant, a girl who had made the conscious decision to follow Wesley's lead. And as the trial came to a close, they pushed for the maximum sentence, life in juvenile detention, and then, when she turned 18, a transfer to adult prison. The defense fought back hard, arguing for Emily's rehabilitation, not punishment. They presented her as a victim of a horrific crime, one that she herself had been subjected to. They asked for compassion, for a chance to give her the treatment she needed, and for her to be given the opportunity to rebuild her life once she had gone through therapy and counseling. The nation waited. The final decision would come down to the jury. And as they deliberated, Emily sat in her cell, staring at the wall, unsure if she would ever truly be free again. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The jury had deliberated for hours, and by the time the bailiff stood to announce the verdict, the entire nation seemed to hold its breath. Cameras flashed as reporters filed in, scribbling their last-minute notes. Even the air in the room felt thick with anticipation. The judge entered, taking his seat with a quiet authority. He glanced at the jury. They looked tired, their eyes heavy with the weight of the decision they had been tasked with making. The room was hushed, a silence that seemed to press down on everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge began, his voice steady but somber, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, holding a small envelope. "We have, Your Honor." He passed it to the judge, who carefully opened it. The words on the paper were brief, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Emily Monroe, guilty of second-degree murder, but recommend that she be sentenced to rehabilitation and therapy, with the possibility of parole once she reaches 18. There was a collective gasp from the gallery. A mixed reaction from the public and the press. The prosecution looked disappointed, their eyes narrowed. The defense, however, exhaled a sigh of relief, though it was tempered with the heavy truth of the situation. The courtroom broke into a low murmur. Emily remained still, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze cast downward. She had heard the words, but they didn't register. The verdict was a strange paradox. Guilty of the murders, but not condemned to a lifetime of prison. The recommendation for rehabilitation was both a victory and a painful reminder of everything she had lost. The judge nodded solemnly, then addressed the gallery. "The sentencing will be determined at a later date. Emily Monroe, you will be held in juvenile detention until your sentence is finalized. You will receive the support and services recommended by the court." As the gavel slammed down, signaling the end of the trial, Emily was escorted out of the courtroom, her small frame swallowed by the crowd. The cameras continued flashing, capturing every moment as she left the public eye, if only for a time. For Emily, though, the real trial had just begun. In juvenile detention, she was given a chance to heal, but it was a slow, painful process. She underwent extensive psychological counseling, including trauma therapy and sessions focused on understanding the extent of the manipulation she had suffered. Every day felt like a battle, between guilt and understanding, between shame and the flicker of hope that, one day, she might rebuild her life. Her counselor, Dr. Melanie Carter, was one of the few people Emily allowed to get close. Dr. Carter didn't treat her like a criminal. She didn't judge her. Instead, she focused on helping Emily understand what had happened to her, how her mind had been bent and broken by someone she trusted. "You weren't evil, Emily," Dr. Carter would say. "You were a child trapped in an adult's world. And you didn't have the tools to escape. But that doesn't mean you can't learn to live again." Emily wasn't sure if she believed her. But she wanted to. Desperately. Outside the detention center, the public continued to debate her future. Some advocated for her eventual release, hoping she could turn her life around. Others argued she could never be trusted again. Emily had taken lives. There was no turning back from that. Eventually, the day came when Emily turned 18, and the question of her release became unavoidable. Would she remain in juvenile detention, or would she be transferred to an adult facility? The judge made his decision after a thorough review of Emily's progress. She had completed her rehabilitation program. She had participated in countless hours of therapy. But there were still doubts. The trauma was deep. The scars, both physical and emotional, would stay with her forever. The judge ruled that Emily would be released to a foster care program that specialized in troubled youth. It was a compromise. She would no longer be held in a juvenile detention facility, but her freedom was limited. She would have to work for her future, prove that she had truly learned from her past, and that she was capable of living a life outside of prison. As Emily left the courtroom, she glanced back at the building that had defined her life for the past 6 years. It was over, or at least, it felt like it was. She didn't know what her future held. But she had a chance. A fragile, uncertain chance to rebuild. The world wasn't kind to people like her. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could find some kind of peace. Somewhere, out there. Emily's first day of freedom was a strange one. She walked out of the juvenile detention center, her footsteps tentative on the cracked pavement. She was no longer the scared little girl who had arrived years ago, but she wasn't the confident young woman she hoped to become either. She was something in between, caught in a world that would never let her forget what she had done. The foster care program she was assigned to was a fresh start, but it felt like a prison of its own. The house was small, sterile, nothing like the life she had dreamed of in her fantasies with Wesley. Here, there were rules. Expectations. She had a curfew. She had to attend therapy. She had to check in with a caseworker every week. But there was no Wesley. No man who promised her the world, who convinced her that she had no choice but to follow him. The man who had turned her life into a nightmare was gone, locked away in a maximum security prison, where he would spend the rest of his life. But for Emily, the nightmare was far from over. Her release was met with mixed reactions. Some people saw her as a victim of an insidious crime, manipulated and controlled by an older, more dangerous man. They believed she deserved a second chance, a chance to heal and build a future that wasn't defined by the terrible things she had done. Others weren't so forgiving. The families of her victims still grieved. They still blamed her for the loss of their loved ones. They saw a murderer walking free, a 12-year-old girl who had taken the lives of her mother, her father, and her brother. For them, there was no redemption. No apology could ever make up for the horror she had caused. Emily didn't know how to navigate this world. She didn't know where she belonged. People stared at her when she went out, whispering behind their hands, making assumptions. She had no friends. She had no family to turn to. The only people who still cared about her were the therapists, the social workers, and the counselors who tried to help her piece her life back together. She started attending college classes, though her progress was slow. She didn't feel like she belonged in the classrooms. She didn't feel like she deserved to be there. Every time she opened her mouth, she felt like people were looking at her differently. It was a constant reminder of the past. Of what she had done. She couldn't escape the guilt. But something else started to happen, too. Emily began to change. Slowly. She began to understand her own pain, her own brokenness. In therapy, she began to untangle the web of lies Wesley had woven around her. She started to see herself not as the girl who had committed murder, but as the victim of a manipulative man who had taken everything from her. She started to understand that she wasn't evil. She had been a child. A child who had been led astray by someone she trusted. A child who had been coerced into an act that she couldn't fully comprehend. And while the pain of her actions would never fully go away, she could learn to live with it. She could learn to forgive herself. It wasn't easy. Every day was a battle. Every day, she struggled with the reality of what she had done. But there were moments, small moments, when she felt something different. A spark of hope. A reminder that she could still build a life, even if it would never be the same as it was before. As the years passed, Emily's life began to take shape. She kept to herself for the most part, choosing to avoid public attention. She worked at a local bookstore, taking comfort in the quiet, the routine. The books became her escape, her way of understanding the world in a way that felt safer than living in it. She still went to therapy. Still checked in with her caseworker. She knew she had to. She knew she had to keep proving that she was capable of living a life outside of the shadows of her past. And slowly, people began to notice the changes. They saw the girl who had once been trapped in a world of manipulation and control begin to heal. They saw the quiet strength she had developed, the determination to keep going, despite everything. One day, Emily found a letter in her mailbox. It was from the mother of her brother, Josh's, best friend. The woman had written to her, telling her how sorry she was for everything Emily had gone through. She spoke of her son, Josh, and how much he had loved her before everything fell apart. She told Emily that, while she would never forget the loss of Josh and the rest of the family, she had come to understand that Emily had been a victim, too. She had forgiven Emily. It was a small thing, but it meant the world to Emily. Read the letter, realizing for the first time that perhaps there was a way forward. Maybe there would never be total forgiveness, but there was understanding. And maybe, just maybe, she could live with that. Emily's journey wasn't over. She would never be able to outrun her past. But she could move forward, one small step at a time. She could rebuild her life. And while the world would always look at her with suspicion, there was a quiet part of her that believed she could find peace. She wasn't the same girl who had run away with Wesley all those years ago. She was someone else now. Someone who had faced the darkness and chosen to walk into the light. And as the years went by, Emily began to realize that sometimes, redemption wasn't about undoing the past. It was about learning to live with it, and finding a way to make it mean something, even if that meaning was simply surviving. As Emily's journey unfolds, it raises important questions about justice, redemption, and the complexities of human nature. How much should a person's past define their future? Can someone truly change, or are we all forever marked by our mistakes? If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect on how we, as a society, treat those who have made grave errors. What is the true cost of redemption, and who gets to decide when it's been earned? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who may be moved by Emily's story. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How do you think Emily's journey will continue? Can she ever truly escape the shadows of her past, or is her future forever shaped by her actions? Join the conversation and let's keep this discussion going. Your voice matters.